Welcome back to Hot Topics now. And the cost of redesigning the new $5 note has been revealed, with new figures placing the process at more than, wait for it, I don't think this is a typo, $500,000 in total. Some of that expense is due to travel for the RBA, who visited various Indigenous communities around Australia to encourage participation in the new design process. The coalition has slammed the hefty bill, calling it wasteful. For their take, let's bring in Daily Telegraph journalist James Willis and the founding director of Western Sydney Women, Amanda Rose. Good morning to both of you. James, this is your exclusive report this morning. And news just in, we've also got the Australian Monarchist League. They've released their suggestion for a new note. Talk us through.
Yeah, so basically, and I have to thank this segment because we were talking about this probably a month ago when we asked, well, how much did this redesign process cost? Well, the Reserve Bank spent $507,000. That's already, it's still going, to basically use staff to travel the country and raise awareness about the new design and Indigenous theme. They got 2,000 submissions and then engaged a $5 note redesign committee to decide on this new theme, which was connection to country. Look, there has been an announcement this morning that the Monarchist League have given a new design idea, which would involve both King Charles and an Indigenous theme on it. Sadly, it's too little too late. They've already decided the theme. But I think the whole thing is just, and I'm not saying all this money was wasted, but firstly, this was an unnecessary decision and it would have been a lot easier just to say, look, for now, we'll just keep the Queen on the note, or we should have gone in the direction of King Charles. And Jim Chalmers was involved in that decision. But I think this is a really good one. It's the kind of thing Peter Dutton, when he's been under fire for the last few days for the expenses in the public service and working from home and scaling a few things back, this is the kind of thing that he should have been prosecuting, to go through these government departments and identify where money is being wasted. And this would have been a really good example. So,
like that $30,000 table they had made.
There's crazy money in all these departments.
So the RBA had staff travel around the country to liaise about this. They travelled to Alice Springs, Barmah, Bathurst, Broome, Cairns, Condobolin, Darwin, Hobart, Kalgoorlie, Orange, Port Augusta, Shepparton and the Torres Strait to liaise on this.
Well, I'm glad that my taxes paid for them to go on a nice little trip while people can't afford their rent. This is a classic example of how disconnected our government is, and like everyone involved here, because people can't even afford food and they're using taxpayer money to go on this road trip to ask people on something that we didn't even vote for. They didn't even ask the general community. And who said they wanted it changed? We're not a republic. Why are they getting rid of any monarchy, at all on our $5 note? But as an individual with, I'm struggling, or as a single mum, how would they feel knowing that $500,000 was just blown, and like James said, it hasn't stopped, just gone on something that we don't need, we didn't ask for? And
you do wonder why they would replace the Queen, even if, we've now got a king, because she's the longest serving monarch. So it just in that entirety, she's an iconic...
hate the monarchy.
Yeah, but maybe if we'd become a republic, then we could think about that. I could actually understand that.
Absolutely. It does feel like, despite Labor not wanting this on the agenda for the election, let's face it, they've got a Minister for the Republic, and it does feel like the monarch in Australia, it's death by a thousand cuts.
Yeah, it's a backdoor way of preparing Australia for what they ultimately want. And so many decisions they've made is headed towards that.
Any little opportunity to go away from the Queen, they've taken.
Well, look, we've got a federal minister coming up. We might ask him what he thinks about it. It's just an interesting one. Tell us what you think about that $500,000 spent of government money. Moving on, there are reports this morning that super funds who were hacked on the weekend, resulting in losses of hundreds of thousands of dollars to scammers, have still not reported the attack to the Australian Federal Police. A spokesperson for the AFP said they had not received a report of crime about the incident. We're also learning that super funds resisted warnings just 2 months ago that retirement savings were vulnerable to hacks. That seems alarming, James. I find it unbelievable. Would that be a normal process for the AFP to be notified?
Well, I find the whole thing unbelievable, and I think it's amazing that after some of the big cyber attacks we've had with Optus and some of the private health companies, that would surely be a wake-up call for any big company, that the super funds some of them did not have the appropriate protections in place for their customers. And as a result, they're scrambling to find out who's lost money, how many customers have been hacked. Look, I certainly hope, and I mean, I've seen mixed reports about this, but I certainly hope every cent is paid back and no one actually loses money about this. But this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, Nat. It is just completely unacceptable to not be up to date with security.
Yeah, I think there are new rules where you can actually be fined if you don't have the right laws in place, if you don't have the right protections in place, and that was brought in.
Well, what's interesting is that we essentially are forced to put money into super, and we can't even touch it. We can't even use our super to buy a home. We can't use it for financial security. But we've been brainwashed that if we don't put in super, our future's over. And then this is how they treat the money that we've been told we need to put in. Small businesses used to be exempt in the Privacy Act for under $3 million turnover, so they couldn't get fined if there was a mistake, right? That's gone. So small businesses now will get fines if anyone breaches anything that they do, like their Google Sheets. Then we have super funds allowing something like this happening, not even talking about it. And I'm like, well, how do they get away with something like this? This is a classic case of where government needs to go, this is unacceptable. But will they say that? Because we all know the federal Labor government are best friends with the super funds because it supports unions.
Yeah.
Well, we might ask them about that today. I think they'll be definitely onto it.
And a lot of elderly people that have money in super that have woken up and seen a $0 balance or something like that and can't access their account properly. So
that's right.
It needs to be fixed ASAP.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your say this morning. Here's Shebo.